And then what we do is that we record historical tours mapped onto those locations that you can walk with your phone and listen to directions and kind of walk around town, and you can hear a historical tour but happening from a perspective that is far into the future. It could be 20 or 30 years, it can be 3,000 years into the future. There's an interesting thing that happens. You walk through city streets and you see them as they are now, but you hear a story of how it could be, and what it does to you is that it gives you the sense of potential.
Hi, my name is Eran Dror, and this is Remake, a podcast about design, systems, and society. In each episode, I talk to someone who's trying to change our lives for the better in some meaningful way, whether through a new product, new venture, or new way of looking at the world. And I try to understand how they came to it, what makes them tick, and what we can learn from them. I'm sitting here with Shalev Moran. Shalev is a Copenhagen-based game designer, a game design director at PortaPlay. He runs political sci-fi project Speculative Tourism, and is a member of organizations like Designing Tomorrow's Collective and the Game Arts International Network. So let's jump right in with Shalev Moran. All right, so I'm sitting across the screen from Shalev Moran.
Hello.
Shalev is a Copenhagen-based game designer, and we're going to get into a lot of the cool things that he does. But I think we have a little meta conversation first about this podcast, and I would love to hear, Shalev, first of all, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Welcome to Remake. You wanted to share some thoughts, I think, about podcasts, and I would love to hear them.
Yeah. So at the time of this recording, I don't know how many episodes you recorded, but there are 3 episodes out, and I listened to 2.5 of them. I listened to the first 2 and a bit of the third one. And I know that this podcast says it deals with design in a broad sense of the word. And I know it has an inclination to deal with the techie sides of design, or design in the realms of the digital. And I don't know if it's an inclination or just the people you talk with so far. But in the podcast itself, you definitely ask some broad questions sometimes. You open with quite a philosophical question. You end the podcast sometimes with with big questions. And it made me think that I'm not absolutely sure what this podcast is really about. And I know that, of course, maybe there's not a simple answer, because this podcast, most of all, comes for, I guess, your personality and your interests, and you're just a human being with a broad soul. But I was wondering if you, maybe after recording a few episodes, just talk about what you're feeling right now that the podcast is about. And I'll take it with a grain of salt, but I'm curious.
Yeah. So thank you for that question. That's actually, it's a good time for me to think about it. I have recorded quite a few more episodes than are out, and I also have a few interviews scheduled for this month. This is about remaking our world, right? Remake is about remaking reality, and I think something that Jake Knapp said, who's the guest I interviewed a couple of days ago. He's the guy who invented design sprints at Google. Super influential, maybe one of the most influential product designers living today. And he was talking about one of the themes in his life was a sense of possibility. So from a very young age, seeing that everything doesn't have to be the way it is now, that it could be very different, and imagining other ways it could be. And for me, that's what design is. In a real way. It's like not taking for granted the way things are now, and also not talking about them verbally, but imagining and creating alternative ways it could be. So to me, this is why it's broad and philosophical, and it's about the future, and it's about, I'm hoping to do things about, poverty, or to deal with broad issues and politics even, because it's about this mindset more than anything.
Awesome.
Yeah. Did that integrate it for you?
It added a dimension that I like. Yeah, you
Cool.
added something that was not maybe explicit in the text I read, but I love it. The idea of possibility and I don't know, remaking sounds quite revolutionary to me. So I'm excited to use this
Yeah.
lens for a conversation.
So, and now I'm going to kind of start with my usual opening question. What's something that you've come to believe in childhood, that you've believed since childhood, that kind of still drives you today, that's still active in your life?
Sorry,
Yeah.
please.
And how did you come to kind of discover it or believe in it?
So I heard this question on your podcast in the episodes that I listened to. You wrote that to me in advance, and I had a lot of trouble with it. So before I joined this stream, I did what I think you would like me to do, because I know you meditate a lot. So I pulled out my meditation pillow from the top shelf, which means that it's here, but I don't use it a lot. But I sat down and I closed my eyes and I meditated on it. And here's the best thing I can give you. From a
Okay.
very young age, but I can't tell you if it's childhood or not. I can't honestly remember. But one of my oldest beliefs, for what it's worth, is that life, the world, the universe, and everything else is very complicated, and that is maybe the only simple thing that you're allowed to say. In other words, I am highly suspicious, always have been, for in people who give simple explanations. When somebody's offering
Mm,
me a simple explanation, I'm usually looking to see what they're trying to sell me, right?
mm,
And I am for complexity, for nuance, and that's maybe the only simple truth I hold. The rest is complicated,
mm.
because I do believe in complicated.
Interesting. And thinking back, and I definitely share some of this, though I think it took me longer to get there, to get to complexity. Um, but as a child did you get to believe that? What's the data? What's the input that made you kind of reach that conclusion?
It's really hard to say, man. Like, I don't know how early in childhood this disappeared, but you know what? Let's go with the mythical one, right? I don't know if it's true, but let's
Okay.
go with it. My
Okay.
mother um, always tells me that when I was both in her womb and especially when I was a baby, right? She would talk to me a lot. Like, she would just speak at me a lot, and she would speak at me not like a cute baby, gaga goo goo, but she would speak at me just like a person. She just would have
Hmm.
one-sided conversations with me, but she would keep talking to me as if I was just an adult person. And if we're going with the myth, then I think it has made me a very discursive person. I will always prefer
Hmm.
the long conversation than one-on-one, and I would always prefer the longer explanation and the text and the back and forth. Um, in terms of like social networks, I prefer the long posts of Facebook over the short posts of Twitter, for example, right? But also
Hmm.
more generally in the way we talk to each other, and maybe this
Hmm.
discursive tendency to long talking is kind of turned into, or it helped me gravitate towards this thing that I now see very much as a truth, um, that our existence is complicated. I don't. I think it made it easy for me to see that. But also, I might be talking out of my ass, and this might be just a beautiful story, because who knows when I learned this thing. I just think that I thought of it early in my life.
That's very interesting. I mean, and I can see a potential connection, and you're also proving your own thesis when you're doubting your own simple
Yeah,
story. So you're showing us the pattern. It's
yeah.
really cool. Um, So how does someone with that kind of belief, how does that express itself as you move forward in life? What are um, some of the directions that you took that you can kind of connect with this?
Hmm. I guess um, I that's a good question. I guess when I chose, for example, to go study humanities for my bachelor's, that's not
Mm,
in Israel when both you and I grew up. That's not a given. Uh, the way people usually go to higher education is like through a professional lens, right? So it's you're not really encouraged to study things that are not professional. Uh, uh,
yeah.
but there's something about humanities that is A, not professional, so I kind of had to choose it, and B, is always fuzzy, right? It's not the accurate sciences, right? It's not the hard sciences. It's the soft sciences. So I definitely gravitated towards kind of like deepening my affinity, right? Deepening my connection
Mm,
to the fuzzier sciences, and maybe today when I kind of try to keep myself, half a practitioner, a designer and an artist, but also always kind of writing something or speaking somewhere, stuff like that. I always also doubt myself that maybe I'm doing this just to kind of like self PR. I hope I'm not. I hope I'm really, because there is like a ideological or intellectual drive in the things I do. So I don't know, but I'd like to think that the
mm,
reason I still, give talks, write criticism, and participate in more things that are meta and kind of like reflective on the practice is because I want to keep complicating the conversation. But
mm.
who knows? Maybe I'm
Interesting.
deceiving myself in that one as well.
No, if you sat in meditation, at least you're looking inside, which is more than
Absolutely.
most people
The
do.
the the week of Vipassana I did a few years ago. I meditated before that, but the Vipassana was such a strong
Mm,
tool in my toolbox.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So you landed in the humanities in Tel Aviv in the beginning, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. And then how did that lead you to game design?
All right. When I started my bachelor's, I was like doing graffiti, and I was all about street art.
Nice.
But then entering Tel Aviv universities, it was a special program in arts and humanities from a critical perspective, so not practical perspective.
Mm,
Started hearing more and more about things that in regards to the digital space by studying about digital architecture class from the architecture school and
mm,
stuff like that. And the kind of eureka moment was when the year was I think either in 2009 and 2010, I think nine. I was sitting in cinema history class, and I was at the time
mm,
I was vaguely aware about the new or renewed surge of independent games, indie games that were kind of challenging the quite mainstream, largely mainstream game industry. There was not a lot of, like, it was the heyday of big game companies, and then there was this kind of like digital distribution platforms, right? Like the App Store or Steam
mm,
allowed, after a long time, to small teams of game developers to kind of publish games and make a little money from them. So that was kind of like a new trend, and I was vaguely aware of it. And then I'm sitting in cinema history class, listening to the professor talk about the Nouvelle Vague, the French New Wave in French cinema, the kind of
mm,
recontextualized the cinema from being mainly a sort of entertainment, a mass media of entertainment, to something more artsy. And I was
mm,
listening to him say that, and I was like, I think it's happening now in games, sort of, right? From what I hear. And then he talked about the
mm,
causes, and I always thought that the reason was, the famous story is of the war, Second World War, has stopped movies from arriving to Europe for a few years, and then the war ended, and a bunch of Hitchcock movies hit cinemas all at once. And Truffaut, goes to see all the Hitchcock movies, like at the same week, and he recognizes that there's like the fingerprint of an author, and he says, "Oh, the auteur theory," and they establish the cahiers du cinéma, and they start thinking, about directors as authors of with their own style, and that's the famous story. And then my professor tells another story, and he tells a story of, after the war, during the war, the Second World War, the American army uh, needed for strategic reasons to document what's happening there in Europe, or for propaganda reasons. So they engineered smaller mobile cameras. And then when they left, and I don't know if it's a myth, but it's a beautiful myth nonetheless, and it got me going. When they left, Europe after the war, they left a lot of equipment behind on the floor, so to speak. And a lot of, kind of profiteers collected, anything from tanks to ball pens, and sold them, wholesale in stock, in markets. And the story that my professor tells, and Truffaut and Godard, they found those mobile, cameras, movie cameras, and all of a sudden, they can make films without the support of a big studio outside of the studio system. And outside of the studio system, you don't need a lot of monetary support, so you don't need to kind of like make safe films that will generate a lot of money, so you could do more experimental stuff. And of course, when you see a film like I forgot what his name, Godard's Breathless, right? They film on the street, and the entire street is like their stage, and you don't need to get a lot of extras, because Paris is the stage, and the Parisians are the extras. And I listen to this beautiful, myth and I say, okay, there's material conditions allow for this kind of outburst and recontextualization of a medium as art. And I say, I think that's happening in indie games right now, because all of a sudden they have accessible game engines, so you don't need an engineering team to make your game, like Unity, and you have accessible distribution platforms. You don't need a big publisher support, and you can cut some middlemen, and by that make smaller productions with kind of more experimental stuff. Of course, it's not all rosy, and there's of course problems with this, as we know today. It's not just perfect, but it definitely got me interested, and I just started reading and listening and watching YouTube. To this day, I'm a big YouTube consumer, and just kind of learning about games way more than I did before. That was 2009-10, and I just, by the end of my bachelor's, I was already, kind of known around the campus as the games guy, right? I was writing my seminar papers on games, and that kind of led me. And I was a culture reporter for Time Out magazine at the time, and I kind of shifted from writing about urban issues, because I liked graffiti, so urban stuff was my field, and kind of like the politics and culture of the urban life. I shifted to like techie stuff. By the end of the bachelor's, I was writing a tech column, and like writing about games every now and then, and went on from there.
Cool. That makes sense to me, and this is a process that's definitely happening in many other industries, including podcasting. So it's much lower cost to produce, higher access to the entire world, and and essentially you can succeed based on your talent and your hard work. which is something that got me really excited about
I
podcasting.
think, you know what? I think that for all these media, the main thing that because maybe then I wasn't even aware of a thing like a game engine, which is a specific tool program used by game makers. The thing that's relevant to all of us, to podcasters, to every kind of digital creation, is like laptops actually. Laptops are the big thing. The fact that the personal computers are not shit and also not super expensive, right? Because until the early 2010s, I would say a computer you would own at home would be either super expensive or completely crap. And like something that is affordable and not crap is a 10-year-old phenomenon, I would say.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, the power to produce really high quality stuff on a home computer, I don't think existed. I mean, maybe 10 years is a little bit short, but it's definitely the last 20 years is when it happened.
Maybe, yeah.
But and it's probably different industries kind of got along. So I would guess, text like blogging, that's, you could do that for many years, and then podcasting started growing, and then now video, and gaming is now joining the fray. But yeah, I think it's definitely going to be a trend, and I see more and more of this happening with smart tools, with AI that can help you generate things on the spot, right? And so this is a trend that's only going to increase. And the question is, are we going to have enough time and money to actually consume all of that new content that everybody's making? Or is it going to be the case where everybody has like 1,000 followers and that's enough to have a good life? And which, 1,000 true fans is something that, people start saying, if you have 1,000 true fans, you can make a living off of it. What do you think?
You're asking me about basically what we call the attention economy, right?
Yeah.
I am thinking there is, too much. There's too much art out there, generally. And of course, or not of course, but one of the things that happens is, when it becomes cheap to create, creations become cheap in a way. It's both good and bad. For many people and media, that was a liberating thing, right? And in many other ways, it has made the practice, the art, and the practitioners themselves less valuable. I am not worried about not being able to consume all the things, because I gave up any kind of FOMO, right? I can still feel the echoes of FOMO kind of like echoing in me, especially because I think the platforms that we are using all really want us to subscribe to just the stream, right? Of new sayings, new creations, etc., etc. But I think I'm old enough, even though I'm not that old enough to resist it. One of the follies of being younger is not being able to resist this wheel of the platform, be it game platforms or music platforms or social media. Now I'm trying.
Yeah, it's called the infinity pool. Some people call it the infinity pool. If you keep scrolling and it never ends, there's some weird effect in the human brain, because it works like a roulette. Like you keep scrolling and then it loads for a little bit and puts new content. and they've calculated the exact amount of great content versus crap that is the most addictive. Because actually, if they give you only great stuff, it's less addictive than if they give you some good stuff and some crap. Because then there's the excitement of what am I going to get.
In game design, we call it variable rewards. I think I hope my game designer friends who are listening to this will not grill me because I used the wrong term. I think that's the right term. And variable rewards are incredibly strong in keeping people hooked. And I hate it. And I hate it. I know that this is the nature of the economy of some online platforms. I know it is kind of like the nature of the crossroads between kind of neoliberal economy and the kind of like cheap available communications technology, right? That there is this kind of never-ending waterfall of content, right? That's the crossroads. I want to make less personally, for example, as a practitioner, as an artist, as a designer, as a writer, I want to make less stuff, right? I want to sit on my stuff a bit more and release less stuff. I think it'll be fine as long as I can make a living. I think as long as I can make a living, the kind of like the moral thing to do will be to just make less stuff, less communicate only things that I have thought about a lot. If there's news to be broadcasted, sure, let's broadcast the evening news every evening. But since I'm not working in news, I better make less. So write one article a year, release a piece of art. Maybe I'm wrong, but like I was recently asked when am I going to finish the kind of personal game I'm working on. And my answer was, I think in 10 years. And I think
good.
Yeah, I think that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's right. As long as you can make a living, I think minimalism you can bring it to like doing as well. So tell me about, so you went to this arts program and you started reading and kind of thinking about, wow, there's this golden opportunity here in the gaming world. What was your first actual design job or game design?
In early 2014, I think, after finishing my bachelor's, and after being kind of active in the games community for a while as an organizer and as a curator, and I had some, I had like a segment on a TV show on national TV about video games. So like people kind of knew I was kind of like, I had a lot of cool opinions about games, I guess. I was invited to work as a game designer in a big free-to-play games company called Plarium on a mobile game that was kind of like an action racing game. I was there almost from the very beginning, so like the concept stage was done, but I got in on the very early stages of actually designing the game itself and fleshing out it from the concept. I worked in Plarium for 2.5 years, I think, or a bit less. And at first I was kind of like helping the producer to design all facets of the game, from how it would work and how it would control to what the story would be. And then that story became my main responsibility as the studio grew and we went into from pre-production to production. And I was kind of in charge of narrative design and all the quote unquote content, if we're kind of separating, content and form. So designing the shop items and the little daily missions that you had to do every day, because it was a kind of like a free-to-play mobile game that kind of lent on kind of recurrent usage, and all the little rewards that you get and stuff like that. That was my main job doing the production.
Cool. And how did your conception of the game world kind of evolve during that time? Because I think when I met you, you were still there, but towards the end of your time there.
Yeah, right. I came over to see you in your office down there. We shared the building.
Right.
Yeah.
My office. Yeah, my office was in the same building. So, and it's still, I'm still there. You're gone.
I'm gone
completely. Yeah. As gone as you could be. So tell me, what was, was this an eye-opening experience? Was this, how did you feel about gaming as you were going through this? Did you still hold on to this idea that indie gaming could be really great? Are you, did you see more complexity?
So this was, first of all, it was my first game design or any job in the industry. And I felt very lucky because that was a well-funded company. And I didn't make a lot of money, but I definitely made more money than other, humanities graduates, that graduated in my same class. And moreover, I was given almost complete free range, freedom to make any story I wanted. The company cared mostly about the kind of usage patterns and the gameplay, because they saw that as the key to making a profitable game. And writing the story of that game, they let me do almost whatever I want. It had to be fun and not too offensive, right? That was generally the rule. And but I created this, together with my producer, this very elaborate, complicated, futuristic world where you race to you have to race, and then we have to kind of like, why is racing important? So we thought about, why would racing be important? And we said, racing is the only way to have like a social mobility. So it has to be a very rigid society.
Wow.
So we created this kind of like not cyberpunkish, but like corporate dystopia, where you were racing for different corporates, and all the corporates were like these kind of like a Disney villain or like a superhero super villain versions of real life corporations. So like there was like an evil Apple / Google tech thing, and there was an evil Disney, and we had all these kind of like evil corps that you have to race for to get like kind of a social mobility. It was a wild story. I wrote like 30 characters for that that free-to-play mobile game, and that was a lot of fun, and that was interesting to operate within this very kind of like sort of traditional company, and not a company that is usually kind of recognized as making challenging products, right? They're making very, very mainstream products that not very inventive, maybe, but I was giving so much freedom on the story.
A couple of years of total freedom.
Yeah, and my producer, of course, I policed myself a little bit because it was still supposed to be a mainstream game. But my producer was very supportive, and we really enjoyed, making this world together. And the art team, made very, very wild depictions of what we designed. So it was a lot of fun, I gotta say. Yeah.
That sounds amazing. So then you left the company, and you
I was
know,
terminated.
then
Let's be very clear. I didn't leave the company.
yeah,
They shut down the studio for business reasons, which was a very, very
right.
big lesson for the gaming industry. That lesson that
Mhm.
I learned the hard way, that you can just, one day you come to the office and everybody's just getting, letters.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, the gaming industry can be like that.
The next project that I remember was OWW.
So between 2016, when I finished with Plarium, and Our Wow, or in its full name, Occupy White Walls, which is, I think I
Yeah.
started working with them in early 2018. I was doing a lot of
Mm,
freelance work, and I don't think there's lots
yeah.
of famous things I worked for. I helped some tech companies with things that had to do with game design. I helped a lot of edu games. I was working with a big educational tech uh, kind of like NGO. No, not NGO. I think it's Mindset. It's a big Israeli edutech
Okay.
group,
Yeah.
but nothing big. A lot of small freelance or things that are still secret, but maybe come out in the future. Games. Another thing I learned about
Yeah.
games is that they can be in stealth mode for a very long time. So there's still things I worked on in 2016 that are waiting to come out.
For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, I have the same situation where I'm like, oh, there's some really amazing project. So let's talk about Occupy White Walls. I thought that was a really cool concept. Do you want to tell us like a little bit about that and what was the idea behind it?
So Occupy White Walls is a sandbox multiplayer game. The name abbreviated to AWW or OWW is also the flip of an MMO, right? If you take the MMO, the massively multiplayer online game like World of Warcraft, and you flip it, you get a OWW, which is also a hint to WoW, World of Warcraft, the most popular. So they definitely, this company is definitely kind of like in the let's take MMOs, let's take massively multiplayer online games and kind of flip them on their head or change the paradigm. I don't know if
Mm,
they're flipping everything on their head, but they are trying to do something different. And the name Occupy White Walls kind of alludes to Occupy Wall Street, but the white walls are the white walls of galleries, because what our WoW is doing is that they're build your own gallery or build your own museum, kind of like sandbox game, like Sims for art.
mm,
And they have a pretty cool premise. They basically programmed crawlers, like web crawlers, that went through public domain art collections, like the National Gallery in London and other art collections around the world, and pulled out high resolution versions of art with the metadata, and inserted that into a 3D build your own gallery video game. So basically, you can build your fantasy gallery
mm,
with art from some of the biggest collections in the world, and you can find not every one of your favorite art pieces, though they keep bringing things in. Um, but a lot of classics and historical art. Some is famous, some is not. They have this kind of AI recommendation engine that tries to learn your taste, and it's pretty good. And it's kind of learning as you kind of buy more art, and all the art is bought with kind of like a virtual currency, and it's all
mm,
the same price. So there's no kind of price hikes in art. It's all equal, right? As you buy it, it kind of learns your taste and it tries to recommend stuff. But of course, you can visit other players' gallery. It's online and see what they curated, and kind of like take stuff from their collection. And they really want to kind of
mm.
like they have this agenda of democratizing both the outgoing experience and also the act of curation. and of course they now have like I'm not with them anymore, but I still consult them from time to time, and they're still going. They now have like a platform for uploading user art. So there's lots of like new art coming into the game through users, through artists who are not necessarily players. They just want to have their art exposed, and they put it on there. And I came in as they didn't have a game designer on board. They have like the vision holders, the founder of the company, and they have like the art team that was making lots of like beautiful architectural, kind of building blocks. So you can kind of design your and it looks really beautiful. The game, it's
gorgeous.
It's really beautiful, and you can build your own fantasy gallery with like a few hundreds of kind of like building blocks with different architectural styles. The aesthetic is very not like video games. It's a very different aesthetic. It sometimes looks like architectural visualizations, right? A very clean look that is reminiscent of how architects visualize their work in 3D models or interior designers. And I think it's at first I was kind of put off by it because I'm used to video game aesthetics, and now I think it's kind of cool. It's one of the signature things is that they look like that. And but they didn't have a game designer on board, and because I had an experience in curating exhibitions and kind of like I have this kind of I'm always flirting with the art world, and I do make some I do operate within the art world with other projects. They said like, oh, this is like a curator / designer is and that a game designer is an advocate for the player. So I figured I would be a good advocate for a player who is playing with being a curator. So I was brought in to both wrangle the game into putting some game mechanics on top of it, like an economy and stuff like that, and also come up with game mechanics that would be fit for a curatorial game.
Cool. Yeah, and I mean, I looked at this stuff, and I'm not a huge gamer, I'm not any kind of gamer. I'm I play occasionally. I used to play a lot more when I was younger, but that's a game where I looked at it and was like, this is something I can see myself really getting into, and especially now, when we maybe don't go to galleries, and I during Corona time, I can't fly to London and go to the National Gallery. It's something that you can do as a refresh, as a way to break your routine, as a way to break the monotony, and actually go see some great art. So it's interesting. So what category would you put this game in? Is this like, because I know you're interested in documentary games, and I know you're interested in, games that are kind of in a meeting place of gaming and art. So putting it in a bigger category, is there place for this in the economy, or is this entirely going to be kind of an art? We need patrons for this. We need support for this. Where do you see this going?
Occupy White Walls. That's a good question. I think they definitely want to be like a commercially successful game, right? They haven't introduced. It's been running for a while. It's been over a year in early access, which is how they call when you release a game before it's completely made, but it's like playable enough for players to kind of like build a community and maybe kind of like give feedback to the developers and kind of co-develop the game with the developers. So it's free now, but I know eventually they want to monetize it in some way, and they're thinking very deeply about how to monetize it, and it's not set yet, right? But they do want it to be very accessible while also maintaining the company eventually. On the other hand, they do have aspirations to make some cultural change, right? And the cultural change was cultural change they want to do is some kind of more openness that is some kind of accessibility that they think doesn't exist with the museum model, right? They see it as an ivory tower. And I understand that. I don't think they can replace, I don't think they should replace those institutions. They are, if anything, Occupy White Walls cannot be without, the preservation of institutions. But they have some claims, like, in every museum you go to, at every given moment, even if you don't have to pay, you are seeing, 5% of the collection, while 95% of the collection is sitting in some basement, and many times it's sitting in the basement. Like I don't know if you know, but the art market is like maybe the most capitalist of all kind of media markets, right? Where art is usually intentionally sent to sit in a warehouse and never to be shown, so it can accrue value, so it can serve as some kind of elaborate tax haven for millionaires and billionaires. It is very much a money laundering machine now. And Occupy White Walls, in a way, wants to say it doesn't have to be like that, but also, it's in a way, it's kind of like a very much a product of its time. We, or at least in the beginning of the last decade, as as Tumblr and Instagram and other, I think mostly Tumblr became a thing, we talked a lot about digital curation, right? About Pinterest and Tumblr were big at that, and Occupy White was like, well, what about we make old school curation digital? What if you can be a curator like in a museum, but like in Fantasyland? And that's very cool. And they always keep this connection with real life. It's always breaking the magic circle, so to speak, because it's always like, it's not fake video game art, right? Even though everything is art, it always has this connection. These are real paintings that sit somewhere, but you can curate them. And artists from around the web are putting their new art into it, but this art exists somewhere, and maybe somebody can have it, but you can also curate it in your gallery. And I kind of appreciate how Occupy White Walls keeps this kind of like tension between it and the world outside the game. It is very much not a kind of closed magic circle where what happens in the game stays in the game. It has an active conversation with the art world, for example, but that is just a subset of having an active conversation with things outside the virtual realm, in a way that happens in other parts of the web, but doesn't happen a lot in games. Games usually like to be insular in that way, and it is saying no, we're doing a thing in the world, we're doing a thing in the art world. Recently they had this kind of like PR move where they digitized, I think it was the National Gallery in London, and they sent this kind of like a PR letter to magazines saying, we just did a big art heist. We just stole the National Gallery's art collection. And there was a article in Wired, I think, and stuff like that. And
funny.
Of course it's a PR move, but I love the idea of a game saying there is not a strict boundary between me and the external reality. There is a bridge between me and reality, and it's more political this way, right? It's more. I think there's something honest about it.
So, there's a couple of other things that I would love to hear from you about, like your speculative tourism work, your designing tomorrow's work. But I also know that there's this game that you've been working on as part of your thesis that is really interesting.
If you want to talk about Archipelago, it begins in something we spoke about, which is my work in Plarium. Actually.
Okay.
So the year is 2015. I'm working in Plarium, and I'm like during production. As I said before, I'm kind of in charge of writing the daily content for the game. So a lot of like one of the paradigms of kind of free-to-play games or recurrent games or online games, whatever. Today is that the game tries to give the player reasons to come back day after day so they can play more and then maybe spend more. And these are daily challenges and weekly challenges and monthly competitions and stuff like that. And I'm in charge of writing the little pieces of content that make up those daily events. And at the time, I'm taking it seriously, but this practice and this kind of design pattern is mostly regarded as kind of not the core of the game, but some kind of like layer of fat, something that's slapped on top of the core game in order to attract people, but it's not important in of itself. And it's kind of like a marketing tool, a way to get people to come back and spend more. But I'm doing this, and I'm like, this could be interesting. And I keep thinking, what if there was a game that was about this design pattern that is not, deals with this design pattern of like coming back day after day as the core thing, as the thing that the game is about, because it is an interesting relationship with the player. So I gather a team on the weekends, kind of, and I start kind of like slowly coming up with a formula for this kind of like daily challenge-oriented video game that's all about that. And what I come up with eventually is this set of rules. I hope I remember all of them now off the top of my head. So every level in the game is tied to a specific day in the year. I just figured, a yearly calendar makes the most sense, right? For something broad and, diverse. So you can only access today's level today. If you log in tomorrow, you'll see another level. If you want to get to today's level again next year, it'll wait for you. But that means also that there's no beginning and end. So because you start playing whenever you start playing, and whenever you start playing is where whatever day it is today. But also it means that the game story needs to kind of like wrap around the possibility of you not playing some days, right? So and slowly I got this kind of like image in my mind of like kind of like a low commitment but super long form kind of video game and what it means. And as I was designing it, when we started, I was kind of fascinated by text adventures. So at first I thought like making this a graphic thing would be hell, right? So it's going to be a text adventure and it's interesting anyway. So it was like a long form text thing where every day was a page in the story. I was looking to see, okay, I haven't invented anything probably because nothing is invented. Where do I see parallels to this? And I realized that, the parallels are pre-modern storytelling traditions. Modern times, the printing press have brought us this kind of like, the books that, have a beginning and an end, right? And it came with modern ideals, like the ideas of progress.
Right.
You go from A to Z, right? But pre-modern narrative traditions were often cyclical. Religious lectionaries in all major religions, there is text that you come back on a specific time of the year, in a specific time of the day. You say certain prayers. Bedtime stories, right, are this kind of like cyclical narrative tradition when you come back to stories again and again. But usually with, kind of like at least in religion, with sermons, you go deeper into a story, you understand more of it. And I figured, oh, right, yeah. And with a video game, I can literally go deeper into a page in a story. So my design kind of case that I use as kind of an example is, you visit, and both of you and I open our app on our phone today, and we visit a place, and the place has like a door on one of the walls, a green door, and I've been playing the game for like 3 months, right? And the door is locked, and I have nothing to do with it. But you've been playing for like 6 months, and about 5 months ago, on another page in the story, you found a green key, and now when you get to the green door, you can like, oh, see what's inside. So in a way, lectionaries and other narrative traditions, that are cyclical, did with, going deep into a story again and again to find out more. I can maybe allow in a almost more literal sense,
Right.
you can unlock things as you come back to them. I'm very much concerned with how games try to kind of like occupy as much of their player times, and that is a kind of, I see it as like a subset of kind of like neoliberal economy. So you want to occupy more of the player's time so you can justify more spending. But then again, I appreciate the commitment that players have with video games. Video games, there's something beautiful about building a relationship over time with a work of art. It doesn't have to be this way, but I think there's something beautiful about it that can have a lot of meaning, right? And then I like the idea that the design I made is very limited, right? It's like just a page in the story a day, a small space, 5 minutes. And one of my kind of like my rules is like, you can't have more than 5 minutes a day, right? But it's kind of a long-term thing, and it's building this kind of the relationship that does not monopolize a person's time, but still promises them virtually years and years of like something new, and a new snippet of the story that I can tell. So that was kind of a meaning.
So I want to maybe finish with the more speculative work that you've been doing on a couple fronts. There's the speculative tourism project, which is super interesting to me, and then there's this Designing Tomorrows.
Designing Tomorrows, before it was a collective of kind of people loosely working together, was a workshop. I think it was 2 workshops called Designing Tomorrows. I was in the second one, which happened in Shenkar College of Engineering and Design in 2016. And that was a really fascinating event, eye-opening for me, where we used science fiction and kind of speculative thinking to try and workshop policy, like actual policy for issues that seem to be facing humanity or governments or large groups in any case in the near and far future, right? How can we prepare policy for future events through speculation? There was a lot of fascinating people in that workshop. And one of them was an Israeli designer called Mushon Zer-Aviv. Mushon and I knew each other for some time before that, for a few years before that. And I was a big fan of some of his kind of like political design projects. One of here, which are audio tours, but that are dislocative instead of locative. As you know, how they talk about locative media, audio tours is locative media. His was dislocative in the sense that he created audio tours that are happening in Gaza, right? And it did that, in the times that Israel was constantly attacking Gaza. But he mapped them onto the streets of Tel Aviv in a way that you would walk through Tel Aviv, and you would walk the same distances that you would walk in the center of Gaza and hear stories from Gaza. And he worked with a Gazan journalist. But you would hear them in Tel Aviv as a way to kind of expose people on the other side to whatever is happening there. It's a form of protest. He did the same thing in New York, where he mapped the streets of Baghdad onto the streets of New York in a time where the damages of American activity in Iraq were beginning to kind of like be exposed. And I was a big fan of this project, and him and I both wanted to work together for a long time. And inspired by this project and the workshop of using speculation to design policy, we created something called speculative tourism. And speculative tourism is also an audio tour or audio walk locative project. But instead of bringing in visions of the past, we are bringing visions of the future. Every iteration of the project begins with a kind of speculative workshop where we use all kinds of narrative and speculative techniques to build a futuristic scenario and also create a history for it. So a history leading from like a history that makes sense in a way, that leads from our present moment to some kind of future. And we map this future onto a specific locale, a city that we're working in, or usually cities, right? Or a specific neighborhood even. And then what we do is that we record historical tours mapped onto those locations that you can, walk with your phone and listen to directions and kind of walk around town. And you can hear a historical tour, but happening from a perspective that is far into the future. It could be 20 or 30 years. It can be 3,000 years into the future. There's an interesting thing that happens. You walk through city streets and you see them as they are now, but you hear a story of how it could be. And what it does to you is that it gives you the sense of potential, right? You are projecting, you are here and now, but you are projecting something. So the nice thing is a connection happens between past and future that makes these future visions feel not like as a possibility, but a potentiality. It could lead from here to there. What we're hoping to achieve with this method is to bring back a sense of agency. We are not big fans, or at least I am not big fans, of hope. Hope is a passive feeling. You are hoping that something will happen. I am much of a bigger fan of motivation, definitely as a game designer, but generally, motivation is something that is pushing you to action. Right. There is something in tying a future vision with my own city, with being here, with the place I live in, right? That I think can drive to either bring about this future, or if it's a kind of like a negative, vision, maybe stop that future, right? Because it kind of ties it to my lived experience in a way. I am there. So yeah, that's generally, we sometimes nickname speculative tourism, we're building monuments for the future.
Wow.
right? It is the opposite of historical tourism, and our ethereal but very much locative, sound installations, right? That are in the web, but also specifically located in like GPS coordinates, are the antithesis for monuments that kind of cement the past. We are monuments that are trying to open up the future.
That's awesome. Can you tell me about one instance of this that kind of speaks to you, or you felt like you had the right impact on someone, or you something connected, and you said this worked really well?
Well, like just recently, Mushon in Israel. I'm now in Copenhagen. He's in Tel Aviv. Has started, taking the techniques that we developed in designing tomorrows and kind of like expanded upon in speculative tourism. And you can see some of those techniques in our website, and use them in a very concrete policy workshop with an organization in Israel called Nanua, which is an organization for transportation rights and movement rights, and kind of like trying to design the future of transportation in Israel. That was a very concrete policy workshop with like an important NGO. So that was kind of like we always wanted to have like one leg in fiction or art, but the other leg very much rooted in kind of affecting the like actual action in society.
It's wonderful.
I have been approached recently by some people working on large-scale tourism tourism projects here in Copenhagen. So I might next year start working using those techniques to actually improve tourism, speculative tourism, doing actual, kind of like improvement on tourism work here in Copenhagen. But also the fictional part, I felt made some impact on some people. So I was working I was doing a tour collection in Arad, which is kind of like a periphery city in Israel, a desert city that is kind of struggling, to kind of like keep up its economy and its industry. And I was working with 3 residents of the city. Some are artists, some weren't, and each of them created. Were actually maybe 4 residents of the city, and they created visions that are future visions that are specific for their city, for Arad. And it was really, really interesting to work in a small locale, away from the centers, and it seemed that it was really, really important for them to create kind of like futuristic visions that either center Arad or doesn't center it, but still find a future use and a future meaning for a city like theirs. Some leaning on its past, and some leaning, it's kind of like an Israeli Rust-Belt city that sometimes seems like it doesn't have a future, right? When you think of the Rust Belts, you think, these are kind of like those decaying towns. And, for them to be able to imagine different scenarios where this town, either restores its kind of like industrial heydays or finds a new meaning for itself. That was really, really interesting. And I thought was really impactful for them just as citizens imagining their city renewed.
Yeah, this is so powerful. And this is what I always this is what I think about. And this is what I think this podcast is about, is like the power of seeing possibilities, the power of not being locked in by what is. You did this in a very concrete way, where you're actually in your city, but hearing where it could be. And I think that's really amazing. My last question to you is, where can people find you? Where do you want people to go and find you and read about what you're doing or see what you're doing?
So as I said at the beginning, I'm slow to release stuff, right? So you can follow me on. You can go to my website, and I document the important stuff I made quite religiously. So you can see talks I've given there and my writings. And I think there's a few cool stuff, especially the more recent stuff I've done. You can follow me on Twitter and Facebook, but I don't publish regularly, especially on Twitter. I'm not a fan of the platform. Facebook, I do. If you follow me on Facebook, you don't have to be my friend. I do publish all of my stuff there on like public, so you can follow me there. And sometimes on Medium. So mostly my website and Facebook, I would say.
Cool. And I'll put these links in the show notes. Thank you, Shalev. I really appreciate your time.
I had a blast talking to you. This was really cool.
I think this has been really, really exciting and eye-opening, and I'm even more interested in hearing more now and experiencing more of this stuff. And hopefully you'll be back in Tel Aviv when Corona is over, at least to visit, and we can grab a beer.
I would love that. Let's have a beer when I can finally come visit Tel Aviv.
Yeah. So thanks, Shalev, and I'll see you around.
See you around.
All right, that's it for today. If you enjoyed the podcast and would like to support it, please consider writing a 5-star review in Apple's podcast app or wherever you're listening. It helps many more people discover the podcast and also makes us feel good. Current support for the podcast comes from my own design company, Remake Labs. We run design sprints all over the world, and our goal is to improve outcomes, whether in business or various organizations, through repeated and rapid design interventions. Now, until next time, be well, everyone. See you next week on Remake.